That's what she was convinced me to go.
Folks, good evening. Hello. How are you? I'll call the meeting to order at 7:02. Please rise. Join me for the United States of America. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, with that, points of pride, Superintendent. Sorry, Superintendent, points of pride.
Absolutely. So Antrim Elementary School had a whole school New Hampshire Dance Institute, or NHDI, performance last Friday, which obviously we had taken a break from. So we're really excited to have these back. The GBS gym was filled with friends, families, and performers at the whole school this was really the first whole school event in 2 years. DCS thoroughly enjoyed their introduction to chamber music, and they brought musicians Louisa Stonehill and Nicholas Burns into the school. At Greenfield Elementary School, in case you didn't see this news, they participated in a 2-week readathon in early March. Together, they read for 6,748 minutes and raised $1,696 through donations from friends and family. HES had a wonderful art day. They participated in 4 art activities prepared by art teacher Andy Stoltz. At GBS, 8th graders participated in the Lesley University Community of Scholars event on March 30th, and these students are participating in a special in which they are learning a role-playing game teaching American Sign Language. So those are our points of pride today.
Thank you, Superintendent. Our student rep is not here. Let's see, let's all do this. We have reached the first period of public comment for tonight's meeting. I don't see any members of the public other than our staff that are here. So unless one of the members of the staff chooses to address us tonight, I believe we will move past that. There is another public comment period at the end of the meeting. The next item we have is the consent agenda. We have the school board minutes from March 15th, the co-curricular nominations, your enrollment updates are also there along with the MS 22.
Which I will send around.
For signature, correct? Questions, comments, or objections to the consent agenda? Hearing none, seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. So hold on 1 second and we will circulate. Was that mine? Oh, that's yours. Okay. We'll make sure those get around. All right. So, with that, we might as well keep, do you want to roll through or go into non-public for Heather? Do you want to do that? All right. So, we do have to go into non-public. So we're going to do that now. This is for, it's a student safety issue. So if I get a motion to go into a non-public session under a safety plan issue, thank you.
So that would be legal?
I move that we go into non-public session under RSA 91A:2 under legal, Roman numeral 3 legal. Is it legal we're doing?
Moved by Catherine,
Second.
second by Alan. Tim?
Janine.
Catherine.
1 second.
Okay,
All right.
thank you for that.
Now we have superintendent's report, right?
Yep, superintendent's report, presentation of business, the monthly calendar.
All right, so we are in the first week of April. I can't even believe that. We had policy committee, school board. Anything else this week? We have food service on the 11th. On the 12th, we have budget and property. Are we doing anything on the 14th?
The 11th, we're going to schedule food service.
Okay,
We need to change that date. And a couple things for the. Lori, if we go to May 9th, is that too late? For what we need to do? The 11th doesn't. We'll make it work, so if we go food service, I'll quote what I want.
Thank you.
anything on the 14th of April? No? All right, Ed committee, policy committee, school board, communication, strategic plan, and then selectmen's advisory. Anything else in the month of April?
I think wait, is equity gonna meet again, or like Tim, you were proposing?
Well, so there was discussion about whether equity would be merged with education, or whether it would be an education and equity committee instead of one or the other, or still having both. I think was some of that conversation that was occurring in those committees, given that a lot of the stuff in those two groups tended to blend because of the way we were looking at that data particularly. Liz.
So just a word on that, as in the equity committee, we didn't have those discussions.
Okay.
So this is all news to me.
Okay.
And I'd like to consider amending the equity committee to something like the diversity, equity, and inclusion
Sure.
committee, a DEI committee. I think that we need to address some of those issues, whether it is in its own committee or as a subcommittee under the education committee. These are issues that are affecting kids, teachers, administrators, and conversations that we need to have. So that's my 2 cents on the merging possibilities.
Dick. Let's do that. On the 18th, there's a pre-existing meeting for education at 5:30. Dr. Ullman.
I learned tonight that we can keep it going. Tragic.
Decisions are made by those that show up, Dr. Ullman. You have to turn on your mic.
I think that equity concerns have a larger spotlight if it's a separate committee, and I like Liz's phrasing of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm not saying that the education committee would resist some kind of amalgamation, but I do think it would be better to have a freestanding equity committee.
So we'll have a joint meeting on the 18th, and we can add that.
I may or may not be able to be there because this is a season where I do work in the evenings, so I will have to get back to you on whether I can be there, and I would like to be
Sure,
able to
of
be
course.
present for that discussion. So
Let us
being that I
know, and then
didn't
we'll
know that prior to,
Sure.
I'll have to plan for that.
Okay, let us know.
Okay.
We can have one specifically for that discussion.
The other thing that we do need to do is, if it is possible, prior to our next school board meeting, or at the same, so we usually do this, is have a public hearing. We have several items that we need to address for capital funds. So if we could have a public hearing beginning at 7 o'clock with a school board
On the
meeting
19th to
on-
follow.
on the 19th, with a school board meeting to follow.
Sure.
Okay. public hearing, so we can notice that. Thank you very much. Anything else in April? No. All right, great. How about May? The first week in May, the 9th to the 13th. 16th to the 20th. I'm going to make the assumption that we will hear back from Ed and Equity and they will settle on when they're going to be meeting.
Or what that looks like.
Yeah, I don't know what that looks like. Okay. If there's nothing else, I would move on to school board requests. We do have one outstanding school board request. If there's more, and that is the one about the website. We are working on that, which I know it seems like it's an easy fix, but it wasn't quite as easy to fix as we thought it was going to be. But it is being worked on. Are there any other outstanding school board requests that I am not aware of at this time? And then finally, we do have a field trip request. It was in your packet. This is an overnight field trip request. It is an annual, but hasn't happened in a couple of years. So we just wanted to make sure that you guys were good with it. So you do.
We do.
I move that we approve the field trip request, and we're excited for the children to resume, or the students rather, to resume more regular activities.
Second.
Moved by Catherine, second by Kira. All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Have fun.
That's
That's
my
it
report.
for you. Oh, hey, Jim.
Hey, Jim.
Next, do we have a teacher's representative tonight? We do not. Policy committee, Catherine Heck.
So, well, this will be my last update because we have elected a new chair, the distinguished Krista Salome.
What?
That goes well.
Wow.
I actually don't think I can do it because it's my first year on the board, so.
Oh, nope.
I
Doesn't
will
say
say
that.
that we did try to elect Kira and put you back on the committee because you weren't there. So,
Yeah, that was,
heading in a foreign country.
we all try that.
It's been tried and it has not been successful. So I will say that today, you'll see before you a first read on the school board packet for IHCD, advanced coursework and advanced enrollment, and a second read for a slew of policies, including health education exemptions, tobacco product ban and usage, high school graduation competencies, alternative credit options, and earning high school credit. Tonight, the policy committee met, and we have a first read coming to you with policy DK, payments, checks, and manifests. We're updating some of our procedures to be more in line with what the business administrator and her office are doing, and make sure that we're following all best practices. And policy DAF, the federal grants administration policy, will come for a first read as well, with some updates to make sure that we're in full compliance. We're working on several other policies, EHAC, the electronic and digital records policy, to make sure we're up to date on that. And then Krista will be taking over. I'm just going to clap one more time.
But you'll.
And I will be staying to help. So thank you very much. And that's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Catherine. Education. Do you have a? Make sure you're.
I'm reporting for Dr. Ullman because he was out of the country and gave us the opportunity to elect him as chair. We got a report on the learning recovery update, and there are three parts I want to report out to. There is a learning recovery opportunity before and after school, and that has not been as successful as we might wish. Due to the fact that finding the staff to be able to do that was limited. There is one program at Antrim where I believe there are 3 students who participate. So again, whether that should carry on for a second year, I don't know. I think it would need a different approach to be successful. My experience as an educator and looking at kids coming early and staying late is not always a great draw for students. So I don't know if that's the most efficient way to lend help for kids. The in-school tutoring, we have a program at PES and AES that was focusing on math, and then at Dublin and Francistown, they were working on literature. There was some growth in math. Statistically, personally, my take on it, it wasn't as great as we would like it to see. I think it was pretty limited. Well, literature, the numbers are so little that statistically to say you really can prove that you had growth, I'm sorry, it's just not there. The opportunity was there for kids. That's a great opportunity. But to say that we made a significant difference in those children's life, I would say would be pretty hard to say that that statistically was true. There is a summer opportunity, and to me that looks promising. We're going to get an update on that. My belief it'll be 3 days a week for elementary age kids and maybe 4 days a week for high school. I think the most enticing piece of that program would be, particularly for our younger students, the opportunity to have an enrichment activity accompanying that. There was talk about a drummer coming in or an artist coming in. I think for kids to come in and have some academics, and then that to be accompanied by something that would be enriching, that was, I'll say, non-academic, would be a draw for some kids. And I think that has some benefits. Again, we're waiting to see what that enrollment looks like. So that was the update on learning recovery. I personally believe, and this is my personal belief, not committee, that the before and after program, we really need to take a hard look at how we might be able to utilize those funds in a different way to provide support during the academic day. That's where we have the captured audience. That's where I think we can provide the greatest impact on those kids' lives. And I will go back to what we heard earlier, that when you go into the teacher's mind and ask them to be creative, tell me how we might do this during the academic day to provide this learning recovery assistant, that they'll come up with some great ideas on how that can be done. The understanding being, and I believe this will have to be checked, that if one gives up their planning time to enrich a student's life, that we could pay them to do that. My thought being, I share this with the superintendent, if I have a planning block and I'm willing to give time to help other students, particularly if I'm a math teacher, say I'm a third grade math teacher, that I'd be willing to help second or fourth graders during that time when I have planning, when they're not in math. I have concerns about pulling them out of math class to get math help, that we pull them out of maybe something that isn't their academic and give them extra support for a limited period of time, not for the whole year, but intensified instruction, and ask our staff, are you willing to do that if we can use those funds to reimburse you for doing that? Those kinds of thoughts, draw that out of faculty and see what they come up with. Summer program, I think there's some great hope there to get some help for kids. And again, it'll be, what's the enrichment going to look like to draw them? So that was my 2 cents on education. Anyone else that was there that would like to contribute? I believe that they're looking to do that, yes. But it won't be door to door. It would be, sort of a bus stop.
It operates
We
like
pick
a
up.
late bus,
Sort of like a late, yeah, right, exactly.
which for those of you so it drops them off near the center of town. Right?
It's so interesting because when we surveyed parents and before and after school was much more popular than summer. So it's just it's been interesting to watch it all unfold.
Anecdotally, because it is only an anecdote, but my high schooler has made great use of the after-school math tutoring for algebra 2. So I don't know if that was part of that. You were talking
You were
about
talking
the-
specifically at elementary.
This was the oh, sorry. I guess so. Kudos to the high school math tutors. That has been fantastic for my high schooler. So if your kid's having trouble in math, use the high school math group. All right. Next is communication. Alan.
The most important thing we did in the communication, we re-elected the co-chairs since it's worked out so well. So Janine and I are co-chairs of communication for another year.
It was co-chairs. That was like a small clap.
Well, that's a half. Okay, yeah, we got that one. Okay. The major discussion was on the community forum, as it should have been. We have the forum settled down. It's going to be on May 12th at the same theater, same time, 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. I sent out last week thoughts on the community forum so people could have an opportunity to read what we're thinking about. It's going to be the same format as forum number 2, forum number 1. They seem to work pretty well with the community. We had, I think as I mentioned earlier, about 350 plus people that viewed this thing online. Don't know how many are going to view it online this time because it's going to be nicer weather, so they may show up. Okay. A couple of little changes that I want to be able to do is that we'd like to make the presentation material or a subset of the presentation material available to the public 1 week prior to the forum. This is going to give them the opportunity to see what we're going to be talking about, formulate questions, instead of having to, which we hate anyway, formulate questions on the fly and then try to get them in there. So hopefully we can get that done. Also thinking about the possibility of having questions submitted prior to the forum. The reason for that would be if you submit them before, they can go to the people who are presenting and make sure that either the presentation is dealing with that issue that they're bringing up, or in turn, knowing that it's going to come up as a real question. So we're thinking about doing that. Now, we have 3 presentations planned that we put down. And there may be a change to the third one, so I'll go through that. Learning recovery is the first one. I think it is, and I think we all agree it's an appropriate one at this particular point. We can hear what's going on right within the board. There's a lot of people that really want to understand all the nuances and what's going on and the success of our learning recovery program. The second one, which thanks for Heather with a great lead into that, is we call it social emotional wellness. It's also safety. It's talking about the safety in the schools, the social emotional wellness areas, different things for different schools. That was brought up in the prior meeting, is that it could be from the high school level, it could be from the middle school level, etc. But it is a prevalent issue out there, as we can tell within these meetings. So we think that it should be a very timely one to address, especially since administration seems to be quite well in tune with what's going on. So it should be a good positive one to know that we are addressing something as important as this. Now, the third one we had down was the modernization project. And given that some consideration, is that the modernization project is within the early stages. And the one person that suggested it is going to be in Florida. So he's not going to be able to do the presentation, although we can probably get another one. What we were thinking about doing is replacing that one with a presentation and an update on preschool. Since the preschool was a warrant article and it was voted in, there are, as I've seen, and I think people from other towns have seen, a lot of questions that are coming up now about preschool, where it's going to be, how it's going to be, etc. And I think it's a very positive thing that we can do, is to show people, you know, now that it's done, or now that we have it funded, the warrant article has been done, we can in turn now give you a lot more information about it, and people will be actually a lot more interested in it at this particular point of time. So we're thinking about doing that one too. And unless there's any major changes, that's what we're going to be going with. We'll be getting to administration to make sure that, we have everything coordinated on who's going on, who's going to be doing the presentations, just like we did before. So this is, again, just an outgrowth of the first and the second ones. And we're learning an awful lot. And the nice thing is we're finding out a lot of people do enjoy these. They enjoy being included on that. And we stop a lot of back talk by having this type of thing going. And it's all inclusive. You have the school board there, you have administration there. I think it's a good thing. That's our update. Unless I missed anything, co-partner. No? Okay.
Thank you, Alan. Anjani. Next, co-chair. Thank you, co-chairs. Next is budget and property. Jim.
Okay, so we talked about a couple things, but they're both associated with the capital improvement plans. Catherine's circulated a couple of draft policies from the New Hampshire School Board Association relative to facilities planning and facilities development, facilities construction, which we'll be looking at our next budget property meeting. And she's also working with Lori on the capital improvement, overall capital improvement plan and policy document. So that's really our primary objective of the next couple of months, is to get these plans in place so that they'll plans and policies in place so that we'll be able to use them when we develop the next budget, fiscal year 24. And the modernization program, I guess I've kind of lost track if Lori or Tim can answer the question in terms of where we are. Pardon? I had a question whether the RFP actually went out and the concept design.
On the architectural,
Yes.
so that is actually with our council right now. And
Should go out this week.
and it should be out this week, like we're saying.
Oh, good. That's all I had then.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. Next, food service. Is there an update?
Sure, yeah. Lori gave us an update on where we are with the operational costs, and there's lots of good news here that we are under what we budgeted for to date. We at the year to date were 9,598, and we had budgeted 76,919. So that's looking good. Again, that has to do with the meals that are served and the money that we collect. So that's positive news for us that we're going to stay within that budget frame. The other thing we talked about is membership and the food wellness committee. We'd love to have a student, a staff member, and a parent join us. And we could reach out to any parent that would like to join us. Food service does not meet regularly monthly. We will for a few because we have some policies we need to speak to and look at the summer food program, which we'll discuss next time we meet on what we're going to do that, waiting for more information from the federal government on how we will operate the summer program. For the food committee, there are two policies that I would like you to look at that you can find online. One of them is JCL, Student Health Service. There's a Conval version, and then there's a recommendation from the school board. I think that's a very easy one to look over and make a decision on what we want to change, if we want to change anything. So that would be one that hopefully we can bring for a discussion at our first meeting in March, and then bring it forward to policy to go on to the board. The second one is JLCF on wellness. That is going to take a little longer conversation. Our policy that we have now is much shorter than the school board recommendation. That doesn't mean we need to go to the school board recommendation, but I'd like you to look that over. We can start the discussion, but we don't necessarily need to bring that forward to policy after our meeting. But I think JLC, we should be able to do that. And hopefully we'll have other members that will join us, and particularly when you look at the wellness policy.
Dr. Ullman.
There was an article in the March 31st copy of Education Week that suggested that the federal government was going to stop its support for universal free meals for students. So I think that's probably a reality. Maybe there'd be some hope for a temporary extension, but it seemed pretty definitive to me.
There was a secondary headline that followed a week after that suggesting there would be a movement to in fact reauthorize it. So it sounds like that's all part of the ongoing negotiations that are occurring around multiple moving targets. I can tell you in my 9 to 5, there's a suite of legislation that is all related and yet unrelated that is all being negotiated at the same time.
That's good to hear because this was the latest Education Week where there was an alarm.
No, it was, there was statements made that it would end.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like there has been some additional negotiation. We'll see how that all shakes out. I don't recommend being involved in watching that all play out. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Dr. Ullman. Selectmen Advisory Committee. We did meet. We had a new member from Greenfield, whose name escapes me at the moment. I'm sorry. Who took over for Bob? Thank you. I think that's right. Mike? Oh, sorry, it was Mike. Sorry. Who took over for Bob, who had been on that group for some time. The esteemed senior senator, Mr. Robertson, will continue to be the chair of that group. And Jeff Brown, who didn't know what he was getting into when he joined from Hancock, is once again the vice chair of that group. All of that to say, they are having deep, grounded discussions, which is good to hear from the Selectmen Advisory Committee, which over the 50-year history of this district has gone from very involved to not. And so there is clearly some growing interest in that group of being sort of more involved and asking the right questions and looking to be a true partner and using the weight of the select boards along with this board to advance certain agendas that serve us both. So discussions about the budget, discussions about the future of Conval in terms of where things stood on building usage, on demographic updates and projections. We had some conversations with some of that data as well. So there is definitely some energy there. I look forward to harnessing that to the district's advantage over the next year. So that was that. That's all there is for reports. Old business, legislative updates. Do you want me to run down the list or do you want to run it? Oh, so Kimberly had sent me some updates she had, but both of us said by the time we update it, Catherine's going to show up with 5 new things that passed in the 5 hours since Kimberly and I talked earlier today. So
And you might have others that I didn't focus on, but since I'm physically there all
yeah,
the
that's what we
time,
figured.
I
So
figured I would share that it's crossover time. So the bills that were heard in the House, that passed the House, have now moved to the Senate and vice versa. So there's opportunities for more public hearing, more public input, and many bills were laid on the table or killed altogether. So that's positive. So on that note, the cooperative school district representation on a cooperative school district board was opposed and it ended up being tabled. So that was positive. Something very positive, 1417 relative to the payment is exciting. We advocated really hard for that one. And so that is $28 million in fiscal year 23 and $29 million in 24. And if they continue it out, that would not decrease the employer contribution rate, but the employer share. And historically, the state had contributed 35% to that as part of their 1967 agreement to bring in teachers, police, and fire from the separate pension systems that existed. And in 2011, they stopped that share altogether. So that downshifted cost has been taken on 100%. So in Greenfield, for example, that would save I did a survey, $5,000. Our neighboring school districts, Jaffrey, Ringe, I mean, they're up in the hundreds of thousands in savings just from that type of 7.5% contribution. So that's going to be a huge win for us if we can get it to pass the Senate. So we need to continue to advocate on that. That's a great money saving bill. Senate Bill 420 was a late bill introduced by a representative in the Senate. And this bill would be for extraordinary need grants. So we've been getting one-time adequacy aid or one-time payments at one point or another. We can't count on them, but these emergency need grants for schools would go directly to towns. We know that the SWEP, while they reduced SWEP, that tended to benefit the property wealthy communities and not the property poor towns. So there is a fiscal note on 420 to the towns and the amount of money that some of our towns will be seeing their bills reduced by. So it's not money that goes to the school district, it goes to property tax reduction directly. There was probably 60 bills that were either inexpedient to legislate or tabled, as we talked about. And a lot of them had to do with vaccines, vaccine requirements, masking mandates. So a lot of those bills, the more extreme ones, seem to be getting vetted out at this time, which is positive news, and we're hoping it stays local control if that becomes an issue in the future. There is some work on the remote meeting bill that's continuing. It did pass with an amendment, so some ability to have some sort of hybrid remote meeting where an in-person location has to be available, but certain members, some members of the board would have to be physically present, but there would be some ability under very strict guidelines to have some remote meetings for boards, land use boards, select boards, and school boards. And then education freedom accounts, there's quite a few bills surrounding those. Some of that legislation has passed and moved forward, and I will let Kimberly take on if she has some specific ones that she's been following.
So specifically HB1.
Under this bill, the state is giving us a certain amount of money. It hasn't formally committed itself to assuming a certain percentage of the overall cost of pensions, right?
Well, what it does is it's supposed to do 7.5
Oh,
according to it's better than zero.
Yeah.
So and if you want it, this is the time or place, but if you want a lesson in the New Hampshire retirement system and the ins and outs of that might be something you might be interested in at a later date. So that was actually that was a big win because it came out of committee as ITL, inexpedient to legislate, which was an interesting way to put it. And so that was really important. Another one that we of course have been following closely, and this is just a really interesting, is HB 1661, sorry. Regarding the regional agreements going to 4 years and having school calendars and scheduling alignment. That was really interesting, and it became completely overshadowed by an attachment of a non-germane amendment in which the House approved the appropriation of $35 million for a legislative parking garage. So the senators need to really take a look at that.
That's the
Yes.
construction part of CTE.
Yeah, I don't know. So, you know, we want to make sure that students have equal access, obviously, to CTE. So HB 1671 is interesting. We'll see how that works out. Something to watch, and again, this was as of 4/1/2022. So please, if you've heard something else, please let me know. Was HB 1381, which was relative to penalties for any employers who were non-compliant with New Hampshire retirement requirements.
That passed.
Yep. And let's see. You talked about 426. SB 381 is something that we're watching pretty carefully because this is establishes the Office of the Special Education Advocate, and SB 394 relative to the delivery of special education services, and that has to do with, is it through their 21st birthday or through their 21st year, and some clarifying language, because districts are actually doing that differently. You know, there's, let's see, there's some things around HB 1234, which is criminal background checks. SB 421, which is really adjusting the payment and schedule for dual and concurrent enrollment programs. And of course, Mr. Rossi's favorite, SB 452, which is relative to lead and drinking water of schools and childcare facilities, and the testing and have remediation of that. So we continue to watch the legislation. One of the things that's not super germane to us, but HB 1026, which was really specific about the format for budgets. And that was deemed inexpedient to legislate.
Yeah,
So,
that would have required an official budget committee to be allowed to ask a
yeah,
governing body for an Excel spreadsheet, but
Yeah.
we don't have that, and it
Yeah.
was a may and not a shall.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't. It was only for the budget committee. It wasn't quite the same bill as the prior legislative year where any person could ask for that.
I do think, though, one of the things, some of the, I'm not gonna have a good word for this, some of the less understandable or, more
Stupid.
concerning legislation as far as how would you implement that? How does that happen? What does that actually mean? Seems to be starting to either be ITL'd or tabled or sent to committee in New Hampshire. That is where bills go to die, just to be clear.
Also in
In Massachusetts too. We are watching the Freedom Account ones, the voucher bills, carefully. Actually, some of those got tabled. Some are considering to rear their ugly heads. One of the things that did get tabled or ITL'd, I can't remember which, was moving the responsibility of the vouchers to the Department of Ed. And so this is really interesting because what we're finding out right now is that that's a significant amount of taxpayer money, with no right to know, request, no ability to understand where that money's going or how that money's being spent. So that'll be an interesting evolution.
This foundation of the education cost of 5%, 10%.
They get
They're
10%.
making a lot of money off of these scholarships, but anyway.
I-
I'm completely neutral on the whole idea, but
I don't completely understand the voucher system or how that voucher system is being implemented, so it's hard for me to comment. I just, as a taxpayer, would like to consistently express concern about, certainly if someone comes to me and wants to see how the money is being spent in Conval, I am responsible to be able to produce every single dime. So for that amount of money to be going through what seems to be now a private business, that's a lot of taxpayer money going through a private business versus having that be housed in the Department of Ed or in the Department of or the Department of the Interior, which manages all the money, or someplace that is in charge of money. Taxpayer money, preferably.
Thank you for the update. Do we have
Did
any?
you like the editorial?
That was
part
nice.
too?
That was nice. I once went down to New York City to meet with the New York Department of Youth Services, who's a, $200 million city agency. We were about that much of their budget. I disallowed $125.22 and got dragged into a meeting with 3 attorneys who then proceeded to tell me that they had just spent twice that in the meeting with me and was horrified that I was actually there to collect $124 of your tax dollars, to which I said, yes, I'm actually here for that. So it was that's the other side of transparency. So, I did, absolutely. They went upstairs that right then and cut me a check and said, please don't come back. And I said, okay. That was better than the time I went to Puerto Rico and they tried to hand me a check for $12 million in closed bank accounts and asked who to make the check out to. And that was a real soul searching moment I had as a young federal employee. I did not take the check, but, anyway, moving on. Is there any, reopening plan, updates or actions for that? Good to hear. Next, there is a slate of policies that you all had. These are all second reads. As they are all policies, they all require an individual vote. I will move these and gavel them as best I can. 3 of them are near identical, except that they do have different call signs because of the way our policy numbering works. So with that, the first second read policy is policy JICG, tobacco products ban use and possession in and on school facilities and grounds.
Second.
Moved by Stephen Ullman, second by Greg Kriebel. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Jim. Abstained? Hearing none, seeing none, JICG is adopted. Next, policy GBED. Also, tobacco products ban use and possession in and on school facilities and grounds.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Ullman, second by Dr. Kriebel. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? GBED is adopted. Last of the 3, policy ADC, tobacco product ban use and possession in and on school facilities and grounds.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Ullman, second by Dr. Kriebel. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstained? Policy ADC is adopted. Next, policy IK, earning of high school credit.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Ullman, second by Dr. Kriebel. Discussion. Kira, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstained? Next, policy ILBAA, high school graduation competencies.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Ullman, second by Dr. Kriebel. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Policy ILBAA is adopted. Next, policy IMBC, alternative credit options.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Ullman, second by Dr. Kriebel. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Policy IMBC is adopted. Last, policy IHAM, health education and exemption from instruction.
Move the adoption of IHAM health education exemption from.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Ullman, second by Dr. Kriebel. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. Policy IHAM is adopted. Thank you for that. New business. You have a first read policy. This is policy IHCD, policy LEB, advanced coursework, advanced enrollment. Please review that. If you have comments, concerns, or questions, please get those to Krista. Ahead of the next meeting. Thank you very much. Next is the Health Smart program adoption. This does require a board action. Dr. Forrest.
Thank you. In the packet that went out, there was a sheet with a number of links to information. This was actually on the Education Committee's agenda in February, if I'm remembering correctly. We use the Health Smart program K-4, and for consistency of programming and for the quality of the programming, we would like to continue, or we're looking for approval to use it grades 5 to 8 also. And I've listed in the sheet in your agenda a number of reasons for that. Besides the consistency of programming, it is also aligned to the National Health Education Standards. It meets the 15 characteristics of an effective health education curriculum defined by the CDC. It addresses the core competencies outlined in CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which is something that we have adopted in this district. And it also supports teachers in meeting the competencies of Danielson's Framework for Teaching, which is another framework that we have adopted for use in our district.
I move that we accept the Health Smart program and thank you for the consistency.
You're very welcome, Mr. Dunning.
Moved by Mr. Dunning, second by Catherine Heck. Discussion? Liz?
So I was looking at the scope and I really like it. I'm wondering, the delivery of this curriculum. Like, is there a specific teacher that is going to deliver this curriculum to the various grades?
We have health education specific teachers, one at each, there's one full-time at South Meadow, and then we have 2 part-time teachers right now teaching health at GBS. So we have specific teachers, yes.
Okay. And is there an expanded version of this curriculum available to kind of look at what?
Yes, actually, I believe people on the Education Committee, you can go online, and she's talking about in addition to the scope and sequence,
Yeah.
correct?
I have the scope.
You can actually go online and get a 30-day free trial. So I believe some of the people on the Education Committee did that. So I don't know if you want.
Okay.
And that will give you full access to the program.
Awesome.
As by policy, we could also provide you with access to the program. if
Awesome.
you
Thank you.
needed it.
Dr. Ullman.
Sergeant Dunning made the point during our Education Committee meeting that what we're doing is we're continuing the curriculum that had been established kindergarten through 4th grade for grades 5 through 8. So we're maintaining a consistency in themes and teaching methodologies. And that seemed like a good idea to members of the Education Committee.
Additional comments or questions? Hearing none, seeing none, all in favor of adopting the Health Smart curriculum. Program, sorry. Aye. Thank you. Abstain? Objections? Abstain. Hearing none, seeing none, that is adopted. Next up is an addendum to the Great Brook School handbook. I provided members of the board an email that I had received some time ago from a GBS student that describes some of that process. What you see in your packet is a recommended change to the GBS handbook to take effect immediately. The current language in the GBS handbook reads as follows. Headgear, including hats, hoodies, and caps, are not allowed unless permitted for religious, medical, or other reasons by school administration. The proposed GBS handbook language would read as follows. Head coverings worn for religious or medical reasons are always permissible. Other head coverings, such as, but not limited to, hats, bandanas, or hoods, are permissible in hallways if they do not pose a safety concern, are not a distraction to the educational environment, school appropriate and consistent with all other dress code guidelines. Head coverings may only be worn during class with permission and as set forth by the expectation of individual teachers. So because this is a change to the handbooks, which you have already previously approved, that is why this is brought to you all for consideration. Alan, Superintendent first and then Alan.
So just before you make any motions, I do want to just highlight the process. The process began with students who brought the potential change to Ms. Folking, the principal. They also sent a letter. Ms. Folking went through a process with those students, also surveyed teachers and parents as part of that work with the children. And what you see here is the result of the students' work and feedback from parents, teachers, etc. So I just want you to know that it was a full process with students, because we always want students to understand what steps they have to take to be civically engaged.
Alan. It is currently the same. Yes, correct. That's correct. Mr. Dunn.
I have years of experience with hats, bandanas, and hoodies in school. I am not in favor of accepting this change. I appreciate the effort that students went through. I'm not sure the public clearly understands the impact it has within a school when it comes to making decisions around who's going to allow them, who's not going to allow them, the consistency. One of the advantage of not having hats, bandanas, and hoodies is the teacher has the opportunity to look into the face of their students as they're providing instructions and see their faces, their eyes. There were lots of reasons we brought this policy in place when I was principal. One of those being that different messages are given by different headgear on who you may belong to, who you don't belong to, what group you support, what group you don't support. There were other concerns we had at that time, and those were really around substances that were kept in the hat bands of hats. Whether that's still a major issue, and I would guess that it probably still is in our society. I think it's important for a consistency of rulings that students need to understand that there are decisions made that you have to abide by. You can ask for the change to come about, but there are good reasons why we don't make those changes. And in my case, the turmoil it causes within a school when it's hard to have a consistent policy on who does and who doesn't. I would not support this for all the reasons I experienced in my multiple years in a middle school as assistant principal and principal, and we're talking somewhere around 20 years, that having a no hat rule, a bandana or a hoodie rule made for a much more pleasant environment for teachers.
Thank you, Dick. Dr. Kriebel, then Catherine.
So, with all due respect to your wisdom as an educator of many years, as someone who has to write notes for medical reasons for hats, which I personally think is ludicrous, I think I think these students have done due diligence. I think these students have talked with the administration at the school, worked with the administration at school, worked with the teachers, worked with fellow students. I understand, we all understand, you can't always get what you want. But in this particular case, I think they have done their due diligence. And just because we approve it today, if it is an epic fail, does not mean we can't rescind it later. And I do think that given the amount of effort that it seems like it took these students, I personally think we should let these students have a go at it.
Thank you, Dr. Kriebel. Catherine?
So I agree with most of Mr. Dunning's statements, and I do appreciate that the student went through this process and the administration took the time to engage the students in this way. However, I see this also as an equity issue potentially. If two middle schools have two different policies, that's concerning to me. I also think that we are preparing students for life, generally speaking, and our dress code, even at the high school, should be looked at. I don't even know if we really have one. I know that uniforms, even in public schools, have become more and more common. Even in New York City has uniforms in their public schools for a lot of reasons, and I'm not suggesting a uniform in any way, but it does limit distraction, it does create equity, it does diminish economic and social barriers when we have clear guidelines around how we dress and present ourselves. So I do appreciate someone's right and freedom to expression, probably as much as or more than most, but I am concerned at this time that we would be creating a precedent in one school that might not necessarily be adopted in the other, and that would become an equity issue, in my opinion. So I would not be in favor of moving forward at this time with this policy, despite the due diligence that the students have done at Great Brook.
So before we continue our discussion, I want to make sure we're following our protocol. So the first thing I would look for is a motion to adopt the change, and then we can go with our continued discussion and or a vote from that point. Thank you, Dr. Ullman. Is there a second? Having a second by Kira, with the discussion will continue. Dr. Ullman.
For points. Number one, I like the idea that apparently students were involved in the creation of this language. This afternoon I got a picture of the cutest fourth grader in Chevy Chase, Maryland's class, and in the picture were several young women with hijabs. The country is becoming more diverse, so I'm very much thankful for the language in both the original handbook and in the revised handbook about religious coverings being permissible at all time. As I read this policy, I think only during passing between classes is the prohibition on headgear going to be imposed. The language of the proposed handbook indicates that the individual teacher during class can say, okay, no one can have any headgear on. Please God, the hijab will be respected. I'm sure it will. Or the teacher can say, let her rip. So the laissez-faire period of the day, insofar as headwear is concerned, is only during passing between classes, and I suppose at lunch.
That is an accurate read of the draft as I see it. Kevin, and then Greg. Thank you, Kevin, Greg, and then Tom.
Just out of curiosity, during this process, was anyone at SMS introduced, asked, involved? Okay. Thank you.
Kat?
No, this was a student-generated thing that they brought to one of the teachers, who then said, well, here's the process to get that change. And then they then did their process through which to do surveys of students and staff. And then the school, to assist in the process, sent out a survey to the parents as well. I have Tom and then Janine.
So, I agree with Dick and Kevin's point about the teachers being put on the spot, except for the fact that the way the students went about the survey, they included the staff, and the staff seemed to agree, based upon the responses they gave, that wearing hats indoors, they disagree that wearing hats indoors is socially rude and impolite. And so the fact that this is being done in an official way, not where the teachers, I'm on, yeah, my thing's on. Yeah, I'm sorry, maybe I'm not close enough to it. The fact that they were included in the process and that it was done with their involvement, seems to me that the teacher can still maintain their own policy, that the whole school is being introduced to this concept, and that the teacher, and I understand what you're saying, Kevin, about the teacher, I'm no hats in my class. Now all of a sudden I'm a bad guy, but that's the policy. I get to decide in my class what's allowed and what's not allowed. So the fact that it's being done in an official way, all the, T's were crossed and all the I's were dotted, I think that it's not only just a good process, I think that it was done in a way that illustrated that the majority of the people in that building feel that that should be allowed. So I think I would be in favor of it.
Thank you, Tom. Janine?
Would it be possible to do a probationary policy to the end of the year and see how it works out?
So that's what this is, because we approve the handbooks every
Okay.
year. So this would only be in theory, this would be the policy from this point forward through the end of this school year. We then adopt every year we adopt and so that would be the rule until the end of the school year, and then who knows what would be in next year's or not.
So we could adopt this policy and that knowing that it could be reversed should it prove to be a problem for the staff, and maybe it could be done. The kids could do the same, the students could do the same type of surveying and working with and seeing whether it turned out to be a problem for people. I hate to take that agency away from them.
Liz?
So I'm all for freedom of expression. I love a hat as a fashion victim myself, which I consider myself. I often don a hat. But my concern is also with the equity between both schools, and with regard to what Mr. Dunning has said about teachers, and also to Kevin's point as well. I hadn't considered that, but just from an equity standpoint, I don't think it's wise to move forward with one policy at one school and another policy at another. So I think if that were different, perhaps I would consider supporting it, but as it is now, I can't. But I do love hats, and I do encourage them in whatever appropriate manner. And I hope that we make exceptions for people for religious and health reasons, because there are for sure legitimate health reasons that people need to wear head coverings, hats, bandanas, that kind of thing.
Kira and then Greg. Sorry, Greg and then Kira.
So I guess my job tonight is devil's advocate. So I agree that equity is an issue. I agree that it should be the same at both places. The work was done at one place. I mean, if we're going to talk equity, one school put in the effort. One school put in the time, the consideration to do this. And while I agree equity is important,
if this is a success, I see there's no reason why it couldn't be rolled out because there's only 2 more months left in this school year. So for next year's policy, it could be for both schools if it worked out. Again, if it's a failure, we take it away. But if we're talking equity, again, one group did the work. And just say they shouldn't get it because it's not equitable, well, the other group didn't do any work.
Thank you, Greg. Kira?
I like Janine's point of using this as a trial period to see how it does affect the culture of the school. I have worked in schools with a policy almost identical to this, and the students knew what teachers allowed it, what teachers didn't. There were, those 10, what did we call them, rascals, who gave those teachers a hard time sometimes. But for the most part, if you had a test, your hat came off. If you were going into Mr. Smith's room, you could wear your hat. If you were going into Mr. Jones' room, you couldn't. And it was part of the culture of the school, and the students knew it, and it just became ingrained. So I would be interested to see if after the initial period of, hey, we can all wear hats, and everyone's wearing big sun hats and, funky Christmas Santa hats and
Derby Day is going to be awesome.
celebrating. I would be interested to see, once that kind of calms down, what the day-to-day actually looks like. Seeing if there's an increase in discipline referrals for students non-complying with teachers asking them to remove a hat in their classroom or when they take a test or whatever. So I'd be interested in seeing what it actually looks like in action, and then using that data to maybe support rolling that out to both middle schools or cutting back at both middle schools and having that equity piece. GBS went through the process, and my daughter goes there. Let's use them as guinea pigs. I mean, I don't mean to say it so flip, but they did put the effort in, and I think it's a valuable opportunity to see what this would in fact do to our school climate.
Thank you, Kira. Additional comments or questions? Hearing none, seeing none. I'm going to do this by a show of hands, as it might be close. All in favor of adopting the revised handbook for GBS, please raise your hand. 6. I'm also going to cast my vote in favor. All opposed? 6. By a vote of 7-6, the new policy is adopted and effective immediately. Thank you for the discussion. Budget transfers. Lori.
Okay, so I'm bringing forth a request for a budget transfer to move monies from the fire professional service line for CTE to the industrial arts. And this is to accommodate additional students in the welding program. I do want to point out, though, that the documentation that I sent out, it has an error in the account number. So the credit account number would be 21330-1390-14330, which is the fire professional services.
I would,
I do need a vote.
Yes, correct.
I would move that we support the budget transfer as corrected and presented by Lori.
Second.
Moved by Dick, second by Liz. Discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Approved. Town appropriation and payment schedule. Lori.
Okay, so we have shared with you a preliminary calculation for what would be used for July through December payments from the towns. I say this is preliminary. It's based solely on the appropriations as they were voted and the anticipated revenues at this time. So as you know, as we come closer to the end of the year, we would start talking about any surplus that could be returned to towns that could factor into this. So I wanted to bring this forth as soon as possible so you could at least start looking at it. I don't know what your pleasure is, if you want me to move forward with this or hold off for a bit.
Catherine?
Can I ask that, we hold off a bit, and I just wanted some more time to look at the data as the, estimated cost versus the actual, which gets reset in December. The amount of change seems to be growing year over year. And, which is great that the cost gets reduced in December, but that's when we actually start collecting the money as a town. The challenge is to collect the increased amount, to pay over the increased amount in June when we're still operating on last year's, tax bill. So I didn't know if there was any way to just, have some more time to just look it over and compare it. I know that our payment went down in Greenfield, from the estimated in June. It was $65,000 more than it was in December, and that's the hardest time for towns to come up with the funds, is during that time. So I know you need to determine it, but we should be getting fund balance estimates closer to the end of the year, so I'm not sure on timing, if it's at all possible to, before we approve it, consider holding off.
How long can,
I think the towns would like to see something by the beginning of June, just so that they can plan accordingly for their July payments.
okay, so May, we look at this again and
Is
See
it,
where we are.
do you think we'll have any type of fund balance estimates in May to look at?
I'm hoping, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, maybe we could just hold off and see if that's okay.
any other comments or discussions? Okay. We'll go with that. Thank you. Oh,
My concern is if you compare the numbers last year to this year, last year we obviously had the huge amount of return money. So I think it's very important that when we forward this on, and I don't care if we forward it an hour later, as long as it's explained. And one of the things we talked about at the communications meeting was having let's call it the first financial article of the next tax season, to explain the fact that your district assessment is going to go up significantly for a number of reasons, including the fact that there's be less dollars. Probably there is definitely going to be less dollars returned next year. So I'm in favor for letting it go, but it needs to be explained properly.
okay, thanks. Okay, also under, new business, there's two, one is actually old business, one is, I guess they're technically both old business. Oh, we're gonna hold, Jim. Would you like me to put it to a vote, Jim? My sense, I was reading the room and the sense of the board I got was that they were okay waiting to see where things shook out in about a month or so.
Thank you. I no way to get that sense here. So.
Gotcha. Fair enough. I will do interpretive dances next time, so you can see that as well.
Please don't do that.
So there are two other items I'll put under new business just to say in passing. One builds off of something Alan had said during his presentation of the communication committee, and Liz, for those of you watching at home from Temple, did provide me with the petition that had been circulating in Temple regarding the locations of the three expanded preschools. So be advised that I do have that. Thank you for that. We will put preschool on the agenda for the meeting of the 19th, so that we can do that and have a brief discussion on that. There were presentations on that all the way back in November at our budget workshop. So that's not necessarily a new item, but it is obviously on people's minds. Second to that is I owe this board a draft RFI building towards an RFP that Mr. Dunning had asked for back in December relative to looking at our previous and potential future consolidation efforts or realignment within this district. That is on me. I have found three that are close that I think that I can work into a draft. There's not a ton out there that cover this well. Most of the material that's out there talks about merging entire districts, as opposed to individual schools within a district. And even when it's within a district like that, it's often more of a situation where a larger city like Manchester might merge Central and West versus anything that resembles what we would be looking at here. For the board members, all of the previous material on consolidation is on the shared drive. You now have access to all of that. If you haven't read up on that, there's no shortage of material there for you to plow through. The demographics projections are also available. So as you're reading the older stuff, please make sure you apply the appropriate filter to that based on those demographic projections. So those are the other two items that I didn't want to not include in tonight's meeting. Liz?
I didn't know if you wanted to make a statement with where we are at in terms of deciding where the preschools are going.
Sure.
Right now, just to.
Yep. So the discussion when it was presented was that short of some type of major change, they would go where they already were. And so those locations were PES, GES, and HES. Whether one of those shifts based on demand may be possible, but again, the intent and the discussion that was had at that workshop and is reported as such in the minutes of that workshop was that the intent was to locate them where they already were. One of the justifications for that was that as we add those additional services, it is the most efficient thing to do to offer them where those specialists would be located. So if you're adding a speech person, if you're adding an OT, the more that they are at a single or fewer locations is the best and most efficient way to deliver those services. Is that an appropriate description of that?
I think, yeah, I believe so. I just want to be sure that people know too that doesn't mean that those are the only towns that can access those
Correct.
programs. So but we will have more information for you at the next.
Thank you. Alan? Yep. AES has one,
AES
too.
already has two preschool classrooms. Yes.
There are, sorry. So PES, AES, oh yeah, sorry, yes, that's correct. Sorry. But the discussion was not to add an additional one in AES. Anything else under new business for the good of the order before we move through the rest of the agenda? Hearing none, seeing none. Next is public comment. It is still the same for staff members, so unless one of you has changed your mind, we will dispense, unless one of the board members would like to step over to the Hudson. So, with would you like to go out of the country again, Dr. Altman? So, with that, we are on to the approval of manifests for tonight.
Okay, I certify that the manifests totaling $1,901,881.33 have been reviewed by me and found to be proper charges against Catucket Valley School District for goods and or services received and have been properly processed prior to their submittal to the school board.
I move we approve manifest as presented.
Moved by Dick, second by Jim. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. The manifest is approved. Sorry, I do have one more new business item that we've discussed previously, but that will now be brought to your attention tonight. Again, as you may know, our Applied Technology Center, the Regional Technology Center, is up for renovation. We are in the queue for that. We are a unique region in the way that we are deployed with multiple locations. Our opinion is that we are a single regional center. The state of New Hampshire Department of Ed, in their current interpretation, says that the facility at Conval is the only tech center, and that the locations in Messinic and at Conant are in fact satellites. Are sending only, which, as you all know, we send students to Messinic, they send students to us, we send students to Conant, they send students to us. Should the New Hampshire Department of Ed's position stand, Conval would get 75% towards our renovations. Messinic and Jaffrey Ringe would get 0. And so that means if we wanted to do, as a region, upgrades to automotive or upgrades to construction trades at those other locations, that those districts would be on the hook for that entire cost. So at last night's, I met with we had a meeting with the superintendents and the school board chairs of our region to discuss sending a joint letter to the New Hampshire Department of Ed stating our position that we are in fact a single regional center and that all 3 structures should be considered as such. They voted to go forward with that type of letter last night at their meetings. I am asking all of you, this board, for the same type of direction, that we would draft a letter for all 3 board chairs to sign upon approval by our boards to send to the New Hampshire Department of Education explaining our position. Catherine.
I would support that, yes. I would like to see that move forward.
I'll second that motion.
All right, so I'll take that motion by Catherine, seconded by Dr. Kriebel. Discussions or questions? I can send you all the RSAs if you want to read it. It's a slam dunk, in my opinion. Kira?
Has there been any research done on other centers that have recently received funding that act as a shared regional center?
Yep. I'm going to get it wrong. Starts with a W. I want to say Winchendon, but that's not right. Winnicunnet is similar. There's also some discussion about the dates of when certain things became effective and when certain places became regions versus sending only. Winnisquam. Sorry, Winnisquam. Sorry, too many Winnies. So yes, all of that has and therefore what percentage they're eligible for and all of that. Jen has done a phenomenal job of digging into this, and now it's time for the boards to step into that discussion. So additional comments or questions? I'll be drafting that letter. I'll get it out to the 3 boards for their with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, that has exhausted the public portion of tonight's meeting. We have, the board has, we did approve the manifest already, yes. The board has a couple of non-public items. I think just the 2 for us. You don't have anything else additional for us, do you? Yes, you do. Personnel? So, yeah, we have those 2. Meaning in addition to the ones the board has, whether the administration had others. So it's student negotiation and personnel.
I move that we go, oh, you're doing it?
You can do it.
I was
Go
gonna
ahead,
say,
Catherine.
I move that we go into non-public session under RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, personnel and.
Personnel negotiations and
and-
student.
And shouldn't that be legal then?
Sorry, legal.
Yeah, personnel, negotiation, and legal.
Moved by Catherine, second by Greg. Aye. I'm sorry, Tim.
Dick?
Okay. Okay, here we go. So, I would now entertain a motion to seal the minutes of the non-public sessions for a period of 5 years. Moved by Dick, second by Greg, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? With that, I would entertain a motion to approve allowing the students to continue in the Conval School District for the remainder of the students that were discussed to continue in the Conval School District and waive tuition for the remainder of the school year.
So move.
Moved by Dick, second by Dr. Kriebel, all in favor?
Hey,
Opposed? Abstained? The second motion I would ask you to make is to waive the notification of a staff retirement.
so move.
Moved by Dr. Kriebel, second by Catherine, all in favor? Opposed? Abstained? That one is also approved. And lastly, a motion to approve the, how do I say it? The compensation agreement for the superintendent.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Ullman,
Second.
second by Greg, all in favor? Opposed? Abstained? With that, Dr. Ullman, I will now take your motion.
I move that we adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Dr. Ullman, second by Catherine Heck. Always being an emotion is the opinion of the chair. The meeting is adjourned.
Just me. The only snack